Hey everybody, welcome to the Diabetes Empowerment Summit. I am your co-host, Danielle Hargenrader, and founder of the summit, along with Diabetes Dominator Coaching and Love Yourself to Health monthly coaching membership. I'm bringing you another amazing guest. I'm going to read you her very quick 2-sentence bio, and we're going to get right into the good stuff. So Mila Clarke Buckley is a type 2 diabetes patient advocate and the founder of the Hangry Woman blog that shares approachable food and lifestyle tips to help others living with type 2 diabetes. Hangrywoman.com covers topics like diabetes management, shame and stigma, cooking, and self-care from the perspective of someone living with the chronic condition. Mila, thank you so very much for taking the time out of your day to share your wisdom with us. How are you today?
I'm so good. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Me too. So like kind of the background, Mila and I kind of just had a little bit of a chit chat off the air. So I'm also really excited to kind of share her story and her perspective and her experience with the greater diabetes community, because we need all of the perspectives we can get to have better informed decision-making abilities and empathetic hearts and souls. So tell us a little bit, because I don't even know about, when did you get diagnosed? What was the process like for you? Because I know even the diagnosis process can be dicey for a lot of people. So walk us through that, how that went for you.
Yeah, for sure. So I, in 2016, was working a lot. I worked at a nonprofit. I was working like 70 or 80 hours a week sometimes. And I just felt exhausted. Like I was super fatigued all the time. I could sleep like for the entire weekend and then still wake up on Monday morning and feel exhausted. I was stressed. I felt thirsty all the time. So I was drinking like a gallon or two of water a day and still not feeling like I could quench the thirst. I was peeing like all the time. And then I was exercising and watching what I ate, because I felt like at that time I kind of wanted to get into a place where just like my overall health was better. I was 26. So I was like, I just want to make sure everything's okay. But I kept noticing that like, as I was trying, I was losing a lot of weight, and I just thought this is kind of unusual. And I just don't feel good, like something is wrong. And so my husband was like, well, maybe you should go to the doctor and just get a checkup, get a physical, see what's going on. And if you're tired, they'll tell you to get more rest. If it's something else, they'll tell you what it is. And so I had that appointment with my doctor, and I when I signed up online to like meet my doctor, I was like, okay, I just need like an overall checkup and just to see how I am, whatever. 26, I should be fine. Nothing aside from those symptoms feels that wrong. And so I had my appointment, and then almost immediately after I left the doctor's office, it's probably a few hours later, like in the same day, the doctor's office called and said, you need to book an appointment ASAP for a follow-up to the appointment that you just had. And I was like, well, that's really strange, because they don't call you immediately and tell you to follow up. Not almost ever, unless it's really serious. Yeah. And so I booked it, within a few days later, and went back to the doctor, and he was like, you have type 2 diabetes, you're 26, so this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, let's kind of talk about where you are, because you're in a pretty bad place. And I was like, well, what does that mean, like a pretty bad place? And he was like, a normal A1C for somebody with diabetes, we like to see under 7%. 7% is managed, lower is better. But he was like, your A1C is at 12%. Your fasting glucose is over 300 on average. So that's a huge problem, and we need to figure that out and figure out what is happening. So like in that moment, like I was just so confused, because I was like, what I knew about diabetes, and like, we can talk a little bit about this too. My mom has type 2 diabetes as well, but it's never something that we talked about. So I was like, the first thing I thought was like, I don't eat a ton of sugar. I don't drink soda. Like, why do I have type 2 diabetes? And that was just what ran through my head. That was all that I really knew.
That's the narrative though, like, right?
Yeah, that's all I hear. And that's even what my doctor reinforced after that conversation. He said, you said that you're eating right. You said that you're exercising, do more of it. And I was like, I don't know how to do more of it. Like I feel like I'm like very restricted, and I feel like I'm doing the best that I can, but I'll reduce carbs even more. I'll go see a dietitian. Like I'll do whatever it takes. And in that appointment, he was kind of like, if you don't get to a point where you get better, insulin is going to become your new norm, and you don't want that. And so like even my first conversation about managing diabetes was a threat. And so I just felt overwhelmed, and I felt confused, and I didn't know like who to talk to or who to talk about diabetes to. Like I had my mom, but she didn't want to talk about it at the time. We talk about it a lot more now, but at the time she was like, nah, it's off limits. Like it's not something that I manage it and I don't want to like go into it. I don't want to talk about it. So I was like, well, where do I go? And where do I go for a person my age? Because like it hit me later that the doctor was like, it's unusual at your age to have type 2 diabetes. Usually people who are diagnosed with type 2 are a bit older. You're usually in like your 40s or 50s. So it's weird to see somebody who's your age. And so I was like looking online for resources basically that kind of showed me, okay, this is how people live with type 2. It's going to be okay. Like, here's how you go out with your friends and you can still have cocktails, but maybe here's how you manage it, or ask what's in your drink, or here's how you manage going out to eat or activities or like whatever, just like living with diabetes in general. And when I looked, I didn't find any resources for people with type 2, and specifically not lifestyle resources for young people with type 2. So I was like, okay, well, if I can't find it and I'm looking for it, maybe I should start it and see what happens. And I'll just start it as my own journal. I'll start it as like me learning about type 2 diabetes and kind of figuring out the ins and outs of it, how I can manage it, figuring out what I like to eat, testing out different things that help my blood sugar or don't, and I'll just put it out there and see what happens. And so it was one of those things that was like, it was never intended for anybody else to really read it, but I was like, if somebody stumbles upon it, like maybe they're like me and they wanted something like that and they know that they have somebody. Yeah. So it was like that moment of like, man, I need a community and I can't find anybody who wants to talk about type 2 diabetes, one, because of the stigma and the shame, who is my age and is living with type 2 diabetes, and then who just like wants to get better without having it like overwhelm their life. And so I just decided like, okay, well, I'll start something. And my husband actually named my blog. It's a like funny little story. We were going out to dinner one night and I was getting like really mad. I was just like, we need to get there faster. Like we're going to miss the reservation and they're not going to be able to seat us. And like, I was just going through like all of the like crazy, hangry, madness. And so he was like, and at the time I didn't realize it, but I was probably having a low blood sugar. And so he was like, you're really like irritable and you're kind of hangry. And I was like, what is hangry? I don't know what that is. Like, why are you calling me that? And he was like, no, hangry is like when you're hungry and angry. Like, that's exactly what you are right now. And I was like, whatever. I don't like, we just need to get there. And so after like thinking about it, and when I thought about what I wanted to name my blog, I was like, that's actually really cute. Like, so it's like really fun to have him be kind of a part of my little blog story.
Yeah, no, that's adorable. And I won't get too much into it because my husband kind of named Diabetes Dominator 12 years ago as well. Like, thank you to our creative, intuitive husband. But I just want to touch back on something that you said, because you said a lot of very kind of important things. One of the things that really stuck out to me, and for someone who's talked to so many people with diabetes, and there's another amazing human being that is interviewed on this summit. Her name is Felissa DeRose, who you may or may not know. She's one of my close friends. And what she's talking about on this event particularly is her misdiagnosis. And with your doctor clearly already having a lot of assumptions, which we clearly know are very harmful, both to people with diabetes and people who, just in general, for medical professionals to work off of assumptions. I can't say how many people have come to me as clients that were diagnosed as type 2. And I say, well, did your doctor run the GAD antibodies test? Did he run a C-peptide test? Did you run just for 100% certainty? Because who wants to treat a medical condition on guesswork? No one that I know of, right? Every single time I've ever asked someone if their doctor had run that test to confirm with certainty the type of diabetes, the answer has been no. Yep. So I'm just wondering from yours, did your doctor run those tests, or did he just say, hey, this is what it is based on my assumption, because that's what happens?
Just based on A1C and based on like prescribed treatment. So taking metformin and like oral medications, taking insulin. Interestingly, metformin doesn't work that well for me. Like I still don't see a difference. And so I've asked a few times, because I've been like, okay, you know, like age doesn't make sense. Also, my mom having diabetes and having being DKA prone. She has had like a few DKA episodes. And so I've been like, that's pretty unusual for somebody with type 2 diabetes. Not that it never happens, but a little unusual, especially to have a lot of those episodes.
Yes.
And then just kind of thinking about like the overall treatment, and then what I know from people who have been misdiagnosed, because I know a lot of women, and specifically women of color, who have been misdiagnosed and told like, well, because of your body type, because of your family history, because of your, like, the assumption that I'm making about you, like everything screams that you have type 2, but I'm not even going to double check. And
that's
sure.
like, to say that that's negligent would be an understatement, like so far under the understatement, but it happens almost every single time. Did you eventually kind of, because you are clearly a very research-oriented person, you're clearly like, necessity is the mother of invention, which is why, you know, you made this amazing blog that's now quite successful. Did you find your way to knowing that you needed those tests on your own, or are you still kind of in that area where you are not certain yet?
So I've had the uncertainty for a little while, and then Felissa actually told me, you need to push for it. Like, find a doctor who will do it. It doesn't matter who the doctor is, just find somebody who will confirm it, because even if it's confirmed, then you know exactly what you're doing, you know exactly what your treatment should be, you know that you're not taking unnecessary medications or being treated incorrectly. And so I have kind of like, because I was told no so many times, I'm still like working up that courage to ask my doctor about it, because it's this weird feeling of like not wanting to be disrespectful. Like, I have a different doctor than the doctor that diagnosed me. So I'm in a place where I'm so comfortable with my new doctor, but we're also in a place where, like, we noticed my A1C during COVID went from 6%, like 6.3% to 10%. So she was like, I'm sending you to an endo because that's not okay. And so what I'm hoping is, like, when I go to an endo, they're going to say, let's do the test and see what's happening, because that increase in 3 months is pretty significant, but also like something else might not be right. So I'm kind of like keeping up the hope that like I feel comfortable asking the endocrinologist for it, because I'm like, I've never seen you before. Like, we don't have that rapport. If I ask you, I don't feel like if you tell me no, I'm going to be like crushed by it. And I feel like I have kind of the, I don't know, like the wherewithal as a new patient to be able to say like, okay, this is what I'm feeling, and I've heard these stories, and like, I just want to have the test done. Like, if it's negative, it's negative. It's fine, but I just want to do it. And I feel it feels harder to ask my current doctor that, because of the, like, I have a comfort with her, but I just feel like if I ask, it's like undermining almost. But then at the same time, I'm like, it's my health. So like, I have to ask.
And so imagine somebody as outgoing and very not afraid to say what she's thinking, like yourself, which thank God for people like us that are, you know, willing to say what needs to be said. But imagine, just think about the system under which medical stuff is practiced, where the person whose body it is, and I'm saying this because for you, you're already feeling this discomfort. I have spoken to thousands of people over the last 10 years who feel like doctors are on a level of like godliness. And the reality of it is that we are, you and I and Felissa, right, and all of the other people who I've worked with who have had this issue, 99% of them have improper diagnoses. It's not like it's once in a blue moon. It's the very vast majority. And so we as people with diabetes or patients, you know, feel like we have to tiptoe around the possibility that we are quite literally treating the wrong disease and hoping for the best outcomes is like, so anybody out there watching, you're not alone on this. This happens all the time. And I know it's easier said than done, but I would just be out there. And I know Felissa, Kiana's interviewing Felissa. She already did. But I know Felissa's going to say, shout it from the rooftops. I need this C-peptide test. I need this GAD test. I need to know for certain what's going on with my body. And, you know, I, being a compassionate person, I'm always like, come from a place of love, come from a place of empathy, come from a place of understanding. That's like my communication 101. But sometimes if you're not being heard, like, you just have to
bulldoze.
Take it. Exactly.
Yeah, take it by the horns. And that's the hardest part for me, because like in my heart of hearts, like, I hope I'm wrong. Like, if I have type 2 diabetes, I'm not sad about it. I don't want to have type 1 diabetes. Like, I don't care. I just want to know what the right thing is.
One thing to know is that you're right. It's okay. I'm not going to get too much more into it, but it's nothing else. I'm sitting here, you know, praying for your endo. Hopefully you'll go in there and say, hey, I've been wondering about this, and this is something that would make me feel so much better with my health. So if you could just run these literal 2 blood vials, literally just take the blood and run the vials. You don't even have to do anything but check these boxes and bill my insurance. If it's not too much trouble for it, like, oh, not even going to get to, I'm not, people out there that know me are like, oh, here she goes. But it's just crazy. So.
And what's interesting is so when my mom had her second DKA hospitalization, I was like, I'm worried about you. So I want to go to your endo appointment with you because I want to hear what she's telling you. I want to know why you don't have a CGM. Like, is it you like not saying that you don't want one, or is it your doctor not saying that you should have one? Like, I just want to see how the interaction is. And I want to ask questions for you that you may not know how to ask. And so it was like so funny. I sent her this list of questions by text and I was like, here are all the things that I think that you should ask. It's up to you. It's your health, but just, I want you to ask. And I loved her interaction with her endo. And so I actually asked to be referred to the same endo because I was like, I love the way that she treated you, the way that she asked you questions. She didn't assume anything about you. She didn't say like, why did you have DKA? Like, why was your blood sugar that high? Did you eat something wrong? Did you do this? Did you do this? Like, the conversation was never like a blaming conversation.
Accusatory,
like, it was like, just tell me about this. Tell me about what happened before, what happened during, how you felt after, like, this has happened to you again. So here are some things that I think might be going on with you that are not necessarily your fault, but they might be something that's just like happening within your body. So I want to run these tests and figure this out. And I was like, I've never seen a doctor talk about diabetes to someone in that like compassionate manner. And I was like, oh my God, I have to see this woman. So like when I got my last A1C results and I was like, oh my God, it's 10. Like, that's almost my diagnosis number. Like, I can't believe I'm back there. And my doctor said, like, I want the best for you. So she's like, I feel like I can manage your day to day, but I think that just like something in your treatment isn't working and I want to send you to an endo. And I was like, I know the one.
Yeah.
I know exactly who I want to go to. She's in the same hospital system. Like, I just give me a referral and I'll go. Like, I'll go see her and take care of it. So I'm so lucky in that space that I have I'll have two doctors that are super compassionate and that are, and especially like my primary care doctor, knowing like, I can't handle your case anymore. I know that I can prescribe you the day-to-day. If you have some fluctuations, like we can work on that together. But she was like, your increase is alarming to me. And I don't, like, basically, she didn't say, I don't want to take responsibility for that. But she was like, I want to send you to somebody who has the specialty and who knows what they're doing so that we can get you in a better place. And then I can handle your day-to-day management again. And I was like, that's just so noble because like, other doctors I've had have just been like, I'm going to take it on and I know how to adjust your insulin. And they might have been like specialists in diabetes, but they were still primary care. So I still didn't get that like connection that I needed. So I think that's so important for people to like find that team that's going to be on your side and really help you.
Yes, I could not agree more. And the same thing happened with my primary care many, many years ago that I refused to see an endocrinologist. I've had type 1 for 30 years at this point, so I have a little bit of doctor experience. And I am like you in the sense that I'm not trying to badmouth all doctors. I think it's crucial to have a care team that you can have these open conversations with. But the people on the team have to see your relationship as a two-way street where your input matters more than their input, not just equally as much. Actually, what you're saying as a patient matters more than what they're saying, and their job is to actually interpret what you're saying with their medical knowledge and then make recommendations. And that's beautiful doctoring, in my opinion, and I'm really happy that you're going to get that opportunity to do that. But I want to touch a little bit on the stigma part because so in the diabetes community, you know, there's lots of conferences and there's lots of this and there's lots of divisiveness between the types, right? And that's the other thing about type 2 is oftentimes it evolves or devolves. I don't know what you want to call it, but at first it is type 2 it presents, and then it becomes 1.5 LADA, and then it actually becomes full-blown type 1. And there's actually other types of diabetes in there. There's MODY, there's gestational, which is not happening now, but knowing that there are all these, I don't even know if the right word is mutation because I think that's a terrible, probably the wrong word, but there's just many iterations of diabetes. But the one that gets stigmatized the most by far and wide and is most divisively kind of put up these nasty, horrible beliefs that are perpetuated by the media, by doctors, by humans in general, is type 2. by far. And it has bothered me for many, many years. And I've always been a type of person that like says, I'm doing this for all types of diabetes. There is no dividing line here. Like the things that we need to do, self-care, taking care of our relationship with nutrition, taking care of our relationship with our exercise. We all have to do close to the same thing mentally, emotionally, spiritually to do well, right? And even if the physical differences are sometimes very minuscule. So I feel like the divisiveness is so detrimental to not only both of our communities, but just humanity in general. How do you handle that? Because I think we all, those of us in the public eye, have figured out our own ways to handle that. But you, I'd say more than most, have figured out a graceful way, or maybe it's an iterative process there too. And we're going to talk a little bit more, but tell us how you kind of first experienced the stigma and then how you began to be like, you know what, I'm just going to call this BS out.
Yeah. So like ever since I started blogging about type 2 diabetes, I have gotten probably like the craziest comments. And most people who know me know that like I have a lot of grace and I'm very kind, and like I don't stand for people being bullied. I don't stand for people being like stigmatized or cast aside because they're different in some sort of way. Like that's just not my style. And so when it started to happen to me, I was like, whoa, wait a second. Like, no, absolutely not. Like, one, this is not happening, because like, you're not going to tell me how I manage my own chronic illness and tell me that like based on the way that I look, or based on how much I weigh, or based on the fact that I have type 2, that I'm not trying, or that I don't care about my health. And two, like, you have to know the whole side of someone's story, and no one is ever going to know that. Like, you're only going to know what I say or what I present or what you see, and that's all that you're going to know. And so when I started to get these comments, like at first, when I started blogging, I didn't know that type 2 diabetes had like the stigma that it did. I just thought, like I said before, that it was caused by eating too much sugar. That's what people thought. That's what I thought. That's what everybody thought. And that's it. I didn't realize that there were kind of these like, I don't know, like deeply personal like attacks on people who have type 2 diabetes. And so I kind of said this funny thing on Twitter the other day. I said, like, you know, having type 2 diabetes or having insulin resistance is not a character flaw. Like, it doesn't make you a bad person for your like body not to be able to use insulin properly, just as it doesn't make you a bad person that your body doesn't produce any insulin at all and that your pancreas is broken. Like, none of that like changes who you are as a person. It just changes the way that you manage your health. And so there's I think there's such a stigma toward people who are overweight or obese. And so that's one thing. Like, there are like the shows like My 600-Pound Life, or like that basically like show people in their most vulnerable moments, and everybody thinks that like, okay, if you're fat, like that's your life. Like, right. Your life is going to be exactly like that. Yeah. And yeah, you're going to have diabetes, and you know, and then the other thing was that I think people have for so long only seen versions of people with type 2 diabetes that are probably like the most like overblown and cartoonized versions. So they see people who are like binging cheeseburgers, or they see a picture, like if you Google like diabetes, you see like piles of sugar and like stacks of candy bars and all of these like things that really misrepresent the chronic illness, and you don't see the people actually living with it. So you don't see like thin people with type 2 diabetes who are constantly exercising and watching their blood sugars and don't look like the typical person who has diabetes. I think it's really interesting. There's that show Blackish on ABC. Yep. And they actually did an episode where the main character finds out that he has type 2 diabetes.
Because Anthony Anderson, right?
Yeah. And he actually has it.
Yes, I know.
Which I was like, oh my gosh, like this is such good representation, because it, you know, it's like this cool guy who is like, you know, moderately wealthy. He's like high in his position at an advertising firm. He has this great family and this great life. And like, he finds out that he has this chronic illness that really changes his life. And it's not shown as like he eats 25 candy bars a day and that's why he has diabetes. It's kind of like anybody could have diabetes at
anyone.
And so I think like when I started to get those comments and when I started to get people talking to me that way, it made me want to explore like, well, why is this stigma in existence? Like, why do people feel that way? And I still don't have the answer to that question, but the thing that I thought was most important for other people with type 2 diabetes was for me to call out those comments and for me to say like, this is not okay and this is wrong. And so if you want me to screen share,
I would love that. And I'll just kind of, while Mila's bringing up her screen, it's just that I think, just like anything, when people are sitting behind a computer screen, for some reason, fear is the ruling emotion, and for some reason attacking other people is the way that comes out, and that is humanity at its finest. I'll just leave it at that, and that's sarcasm for anyone who needs
absolutely. And I feel the same way. I'm kind of like, if I were standing in front of you, there's no way, and I'll just look these up, I won't read them, but I think it's interesting for people to see, and these come from all over. Like these are as old as like a year ago to like half a year ago, to like, I think this article in Yahoo that I'll show on the next slide came out about a month ago. And it had over 600 comments that were mostly horrible, like mostly judgmental, mostly awful. What's really interesting too is like some of these came from working with brands who ran an ad on my content. And so people would come and they would comment, and I got comments like I did one with an eye company where I was talking about diabetic retinopathy. And I was like, I really take care of my eyes and this is why. And I've always had bad vision, but I always make sure to get my eyes checked because I want to make sure that my eye health is always in check, and then I'm always looking after like all parts of my health. The picture that I chose, I had baked these cookies. They were low carb cookies with like sugar substitutes and almond flour. They were amazing. They were so good. And I have a recipe for them on my site. And so one of the pictures was me like eating this cookie. And it was like a picture with like my glasses kind of in the shot. And then I'm just like snacking on the cookie. I'm happy, whatever. And so somebody, like, I didn't include this comment here, but somebody was like, if you have diabetes, you shouldn't be eating cookies. Like, what's wrong?
Oh my God.
Of course you're going to go blind from diabetes. And I was like, oh my God, like this just proves the point again. But what's really nice is like in those instances when that does happen, like I always have really open conversations with the brands that I work with. And I tell them like, if you promote my content, I'm always going to lead with diabetes. Like I'm always going to talk about diabetes. However, you might see some really horrible comments, and every single time they've all said, we'll back you up. It's okay. Like we don't.
And has that so true? Have the companies backed you up as they said that they would?
Oh yeah. Like commenting back and telling people like why their comments are wrong and pointing to research and kind of like reiterating that stigmatizing people with diabetes doesn't do anything to help take
anyone.
Care.
Yeah. And I just want to say really quickly, because this, I think you have another screen, but I just want to point out the fact that I love your response, which says, love you though, so bothered, and I love it. One of the things that I've picked up over my life from being on the internet and sharing things from YouTube and all kinds of stuff over the last, 8-9 years is one of the things I do is I block you and I bless you.
Yeah.
I don't have time. I will give you my 2 cents on it. I'm not even going to come at your throat, but I'm just going to be like, I will pick you apart psychologically, like saying, hey, clearly you're bothered by this because it's something that you're upset about with yourself. This has nothing to do with me. I have nothing but blessings and love for you, and you're blocked. Block you and bless you. Peace. Like that. I don't spend any more time than that, than kind of saying, hey, wake up. This isn't me that you're upset about. It's you. And same with you. Nobody's upset about your diabetes. Nobody's upset about what you're eating. They're upset about their damn selves. And that's the only way they know how to express that is to be vitriolic and, anyway. You're clearly a beautiful soul. I love you though. So bothered, and I love it.
Yeah, and I love that response. Like at first when I would get them, I would be like, okay, well, this is why people have type 2 diabetes. It's not this and this and this. And I would try to explain. And at a certain point I was like, I'm spending so much of my time trying to explain this to somebody who is not going to hear it anyway. Like, why am I trying to change their mind? There's no point. And so when I had talked to a friend about it, and she kind of said the same thing. She was like, well, they're not bothered by you. They're bothered by themselves. Like there's something in the power that you have that is showing up in front of them that is making them angry. And she was like, that's a good thing. That means that you're making the right people mad. And I was like, man, that's so good. And so I just kept thinking like, okay, if I wanted to use a response that didn't take up too much of my time, because I'll answer people's genuine questions about diabetes. Like, if they're like, I'm really confused about this, like what are the differences? Or I have had a hard time kind of understanding what diabetes is or how it's caused, I can point them to research that talks about that or articles that talk about that. But when it's somebody who is just like attacking for the sake of attack, I'm like, okay, I am so sorry that you're wasting your time doing this today. Like, I'm living rent-free in your mind. I apologize. Like, you know, let me just do the easy thing for you and make sure that you can't see my stuff anymore.
Exactly.
Like, what's the point? So yeah, so these are some of the comments, and I think people might have had time to read those. Like this, and then there's more. The one about the person who's a physician.
Okay, so, Karen.
I was like, cool, your name's Karen. Great.
I really can't even. It'd only been better if her name was Becky, honestly.
Yeah, so I mean, people made all kinds of judgments, like about the way that I manage diabetes, about what I eat, and literally the story is just about my diagnosis. It's literally what I told you in the beginning of our conversation. Like, it was just telling people that, like, I felt tired, I felt fatigued, but it was something more than that.
Wow.
Exhaustion.
This one's even, this is even deeper to talk about. Not even, this last one is so riddled in disgustingness that I can't even.
Awful. So I actually made a video about this, and I called it, it was kind of like my celebrities read mean tweets moment. It was like reading mean comments about my diabetes diagnosis. So I took like probably 25 of these comments, like the worst of them, and read them and kind of explained like how they made me feel. And so that one actually made me laugh so hard because I was like, oh my God, he's describing a T-Rex, like little arms and a big head. So I put like a little T-Rex over my face.
Yeah, but there's also some deeply embedded racism in there too. It is in their hereditary genes to have diabetic. Like, don't eat. Yeah, next.
And then the last slide, and this is one that gets me and that I think kind of brings our conversation full circle, kind of just about the community. And it's somebody who has type 1 and says that they don't have time for people with type 2 because basically it's our fault that we have diabetes. And we've done it to ourselves and we're in denial about it. And I think what was interesting about the story that I shared with Yahoo was like, I don't do it all perfectly. Like, I have a cheeseburger every once in a while and I post it on my Instagram. I love candy. Like, I'll have candy, but the thing that I know differently now is like, observe my serving sizes and understand like how that's going to affect my blood sugar. And so for somebody to say like, I have type 1, so I'm superior and I understand my body and I understand what I'm doing, and it's not my fault that I have diabetes, but her diabetes is self-inflicted and she's in denial about the way that she takes care of herself, is like so judgmental and so awful. But it's how so many people do think. And it's we have this conversation all the time, like with like insulin for all, you know, people are like, people with type 2 diabetes don't deserve insulin, like they should just eat right and exercise.
Oh, man.
Like, think about what you're saying there. Like, you're saying that a whole group of people don't deserve something that you feel like you need to live because you don't think they deserve it, because you think that they've brought it on themselves. And it's such an unfair assumption and such a fight that I just like, every time I see it happen, I'm like, I can't believe you just said this. Like, this is so wild and insane to me. And it's been really nice for me because I've made a lot of friends who have type 1, just because like the sheer number of people with type 2 are like not out there. Like, most people who do talk about type of diabetes are type 1 or LADA. And so it's been really nice for people to see kind of like my pathway and my journey living with diabetes. And I'll take this off.
Yeah, I was going to say, take that ugliness down, bring your beautiful self back up, because we don't need to look at that anymore.
Yeah, but it's been awesome to forge these friendships and meet people who have that assumption, and they meet me, and like, not that I like have to change everybody's minds one by one, but they're like, oh wow, that might not be indicative of every single person with type 2 diabetes. Like, of course, there are some people with type 1 that don't take care. There are some people with type 2 who don't take care. That's always going to be true. But I think when people see that like the vast majority of people care about their health and are afraid of the stigma and are sometimes shamed into silence and shamed into not taking care of themselves, like they kind of see like, oh, okay, it's like we're all fighting for the same thing. Our bodies behave differently, but we're all in it for the common goal to cure diabetes, to make sure that people can, and until then, make sure that people can live a happy, healthy life with diabetes and the access that they need to be able to take care of themselves. Yeah. So it's when I read that comment, I think that one of all, like the other ones didn't hurt my feelings because I was like, whatever, like you don't get it. You're making a total assumption based on like one picture you're seeing in this article and the first 3 lines of the story. Like that's it. But when I saw that one, I was like, man, that stings, because it was just a reminder that people definitely do feel that way. And people don't see that people with type 2 are fighting just as hard and just as much to make sure that they have a long and healthy life.
Yeah. I was going to say, I remember being at a conference in 2015, and it's not a conference that exists anymore, the Diabetes Unconference. Shout out to Christelle for creating that space for while it was there. It was a fantastic space. And one of the things that we talked about in there, which, you know, I already knew, but I always say I'm not my audience because I am passionate about learning about diabetes and health and wellness. Like I actually love doing it. It's not like I do it like, you know, forcibly, but you know, about 90% of people with diabetes are type 2 and about 10% or even less are type 1. But what you just said about you are looking, nobody's out there talking about it. Meanwhile, the 10% of us, 5% of us people with type 1 are over here shouting and being advocates, which is fantastic. And please, no means by saying anyone should stop. In fact, more people I would love to see start. But I think that the need for that in the type 2 space is so vast and so open. And the fact that you're in there kind of filling this need is I'm super grateful for it. And I'm sure there are thousands of people that are grateful for it that don't, you know, that are lurking and not, you know, feeling up to commenting yet because of exactly what you said. The reason why people with type 2 aren't out there shouting is because they're in there feeling shame and blame and guilt, a lot of times imposed by their own medical care team about their body not acting or behaving in the way that, you know, whatever you want to call it, God intended or nature intended or whatever you want to call it. And that is just a vicious downward spiral that it's very difficult to get out of, especially when the people you look to guide you, like your medical professionals, are the ones that are kind of spiraling you down that way. So
yeah, absolutely. And I've been lucky because I've always kind of noticed this. And so I have a pretty thick skin. And like I said, I have a lot of grace for people. So I'm just like, oh, I feel so bad for you. Like, go on about your day. But as I've noticed this, it's been really cool to feel like I was like one of the only people, because I'm not the only person, but I felt like I was one of the only people existing in that space and like really making noise about type 2 diabetes, stigma, and like treating people with dignity. And over time, I've noticed that the conversation is getting larger and louder. And that to me is a total sign of progress. And I work with Healthline as a community guide for their type 2 diabetes app. And it's a space just for people with prediabetes and type 2, which is rare online. Like you rarely see a place like that kind of feels like safe and insulated. And people can sign in. We have like nightly chats that talk about like different diabetes topics. Like the other night we had a chat about like CBD and how it affects diabetes and your blood sugar. And is it good for you? Should you try it? Should you not? And like we have these conversations that people can feel safe with, and that they can also feel like, okay, I have people here to back me up. And one of the questions one time that I asked the group, and it's like a ton of people. It's pretty insane. And I asked them, like, do you talk about your type 2 diabetes outside of this space? Like, do you blog about it? Do you talk about it with your family? Do you have conversations about it outside of this and outside of your doctor's office? Like, do you tell anybody? And most people said, I'm afraid. Like, I'm just scared. I'm scared that somebody's going to judge me. I'm scared that somebody, when I'm at Thanksgiving, is going to be like, why are you eating that? Like, should that be on your plate? I'm scared that if I have complications, people are going to think that I didn't take care of myself, even though I'm trying really hard, you know? And so there are all of these fears like people have about having type 2 and then being labeled and judged through it. And I feel like that's like, there's so much space for and so much room for empowerment for people with type 2 diabetes, because it's nothing to be ashamed of. Like it was really funny when I knew that I was going to the doctor, like from my CGM, I knew that my blood sugars were just everywhere and crazy. And I tweeted like, I'm really scared about my doctor's visit. Like, I hope she has mercy on me, because my A1C I know is going to go up, and I know that I'm going to get a higher number than I was at before. And I've always been able to kind of like brag, like, oh yeah, I'm at 6.3, like it's good, I'm managing, I'm fine. And so when I got my A1C results back and she was like, okay, your A1C is 10, what happened? I was like, oh my God. I was just thinking like, I can't even say the number 10 out loud. I don't feel like I could tell anybody that my A1C is 10, because people look at me like, okay, I'm doing diabetes okay. And then it proves all these comments right. It makes them say like, well, she doesn't take care. She doesn't do this. Like her A1C is so high. Like she's going to get all these complications. And if like, I think to myself, like if I have that thought and I have that and I'm vocal and I'm usually like an open book about diabetes, like I don't care who knows what, I'm like, I'll tell you. If you ask, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
And then I just wonder about like all the other people who feel like they could never say that out loud to anybody, and they have to keep that to themselves, and they don't have anybody to talk to about that. And they feel just like that shame by themselves, and they don't have somebody to say like, you're going to be all right. Like,
I bet that if you shared that, or maybe you did outside of here, people would love you for your vulnerability, would love you for your honesty. That's my thought, because I totally understand. I think it was 2016. I did this 30-day kind of campaign I did on Instagram and Facebook, where I posted a 24-hour snapshot of my CGM for 30 days straight. And those 30 days happened to be December. So through Christmas, through New Year's, and like you'd see some nights where it was just like, I literally went past like up to 400, like whatever. I'm just like, look, this is real life. I'm still a diabetes dominator. Like I'm still doing my thing. I'm still doing the best I can, and I'm still getting high blood sugar sometimes. Like perfect's not real. So when you say about sharing that, all I can say just from my own perspective and experience is that it would be a beautiful share for people, because makes us all feel human.
Because we are. I mean, like nobody is perfect, and there are some people who are so perfect, and they have beautiful like tiny waves in their lines, and it's always in range, and it's great. But there are lots of us too that have those days where it's just like you do everything you know how to do, and it still doesn't work out, and you just have to be like, I'll try again tomorrow. So I think also like looking at those numbers and thinking like, these numbers don't define again who I am. They don't define my worth. They just tell me what I need to do next. They just tell me like how I need to treat myself. I think is also just like such a beautiful and empowering thing, because we often look at those numbers as a grade. And when you look at it like that, it hurt. Like it feels like, oh, I'm the worst person in the world because I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to take care. But I think once you like release that, and then you realize like, okay, I can do it. And like, I just have to change a little bit of what I'm doing and kind of like figure out the tweaks that are going to get me back in the right place and ask for help. I think then you get back to a place where it's like, okay, I'm good here, and I can do it.
Yeah. Oh, so thank you so much for sharing your heart and your vulnerability and your journey. And whatever links that Mila has provided will be directly under this video. Go look at her blog. She puts like amazing recipes up and high quality, beautiful everything. So go look at her stuff. And if you're thinking about, or anyway, also that Healthline is there another way that people with type 2 that might be watching this that are like, what is that group that she was talking about? Do you have that, or can you?
Yeah, I can send that to you as a link. And then if you want to search it, it's also in the App Store. So just search an app or Google Play Store and you'll be able to find it. It's just called T2D Healthline.
T2D Healthline in the App Store. Okay, perfect. Because I know a lot of people probably heard you talking about that. We're like, yo, I need that resource now. Where can I get that? So thank you for sharing that. And really just for your time and for your energy and everything. I will continue to follow your work and share your stuff and everything out there, because more people, please speak up. Join Mila, join the rest of the type 2 community that are out there shouting their truths, because we're all human and we all deserve love. We all deserve insulin and everything else that's good in this life. So Mila, just thank you. It's been a pleasure for me. I hope everybody else out there has gotten even a quarter of the empowerment, the feelings of enlightenment, even just hearing you talk about your experience. And until next time, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next interview.
You too. Bye.
All right.